Welcome to Unity Spiritual Center, Pflugerville, out there in the world. And we're continuing our dialogue on the 12 powers of man. Now, the idea is Charles Fillmore and others have put this together over the years. And this book is the heart-centered metaphysics, which is the understanding of beyond the material world, what the spiritual interpretation of things is. Okay? And the 12 powers, and these are powers that are innate within us, that we're born with as a code within us. And that code allows us to live profitably, lovingly, and with harmony and balance in our lives. And the truth is, we believe that because of the world and the way things have occurred and what's in our subconscious mind, we're off track. So we're learning to go back to the original self that we are, with a capital S. And we've done these already. So we started out, we had faith, we had strength, judgment, love, power. We covered a lot of stuff. And these are things that are innate within us. And then imagination and zeal we covered. We even covered elimination. Or release, excuse me, it's a better word for that. Now, we have a few more to do. We have order, which we're going to do today. And Bruce Miller, our esteemed prayer chaplain, song leader, and former board member, and just into everything around here. He's going to be with us. And then we have two more after that. The next one is understanding, okay, which is a very, very interesting power. And Reverend Madeline did still working with that. And then the guys all left me the last one. And the last one is life, which is really, really regeneration. How do we keep this going on? So it's very, very interesting. Now, to get back to what we're going to cover today is order. And it's the ability to organize, to sequence, to balance, to adjust life. Anybody agree we have to adjust from time to time because things aren't working, right? So how do we adjust? Now, the physical location within the physical body is at the navel. Anybody familiar with gut feelings? See, in the day-to-day world, there's a lot of words that intrinsically we use that we don't realize we use. Okay? And the color is olive green. Now, Deanna, thank you for the plant, which is olive green, if you see it over here. Last week we were working in another power, and that one was mint green. Now, what's interesting, I'm wondering what she's going to come up with next week.
What color is it?
Huh?
What color is next?
Gold.
Oh, we'll find something special.
And then the last one, life is red. So, good luck. Thank you for working with us. I really appreciate that. Okay. And Bruce Miller, who's our facilitator that's going to start the dialogue. Bruce really has been a major portion of the church. You've been here for how many years? Do you have any idea?
It's probably, we moved here in August of '94. And it was the following, sometime in the months after that we started working.
So he's called. I wasn't going to call him the whole time. And the truth is, his heart is wonderful. I appreciate him. And he's also a very, very carefully, he is very orderly, if you understand. If you go visit where he has a really neat apartment that hasn't been done well, and he's got a full storage room back there with everything kept along. That's my observation. Okay?
It's in order?
Order. You talk about order. That's please. Okay. So it's interesting how we've shared these things have been shared with people that have the right to speak about it. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce. By the way, now, dialogue. Dialogue is a conversation for movement forward. It doesn't mean we criticize. It doesn't mean we get into debate. It doesn't mean we preach on what we should do. All it is ideas. Here's what the universe has said about these ideas. Okay? Clear? Just to make sure.
Yes.
Blessings.
Blessings to you too, Robert. introducing what we're gonna do. And, yes, we'll move this up, thank you.
I love this group because we have so many great helpers. It's really good for me. Because I need all the help that I can get. And one of the things that came up for me when I was
Alexis, okay.
looking what we were, what I was going to talk about
Chocolate.
was, that's okay.
I mean, my childhood.
That's okay. Childhood is actually a really good place to be.
It is.
One of the things that this just reminded me of was how serious I was. And I remember I was living in Calgary at the time and working for a high flyer on the Toronto and Calgary stock exchanges. And I just remember this one night where we were all out together. And yet, at the same time, I didn't feel together. Like I felt separate and apart from everybody that was there. And the truth was where did that separation happen? It happened within here. That's where it came from. And it was old stuff that started back when I was born in Saskatchewan. I mean, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And then my parents moved to Saskatchewan a couple of years after that. My dad had an accident when he was in the Army. So the thing that I was really struck with when I was looking at what we're talking about today is the power of order. And one of the things that is so interesting to me is how we can talk about order and yet not have order in any way that is heartfelt. And that's where I was when I was a kid. I grew up in alcoholism, and there was a lot of stuff that went on in our house. And I was so glad. I didn't realize it at the time, but when my dad stopped drinking when I was 7 years old, it just made this huge, huge difference. And we moved into, my dad had got a job in the city of Regina, Saskatchewan, which is the capital of Saskatchewan. And it was in the business that he was in, which was cars and trucks. So we moved to Regina, but before that, he got sober. And one of the things that I was really grateful for was the fact that he did. And he was not able to do that by himself, just like everybody else that I've known. And that he wasn't able to do it on his own until I heard my mother say, if you don't do something, I will leave you. And, I don't think she intended me to hear that, but I heard it anyhow. And it amazes me how the presence works within us if we're just willing to listen to it. And the problem that I had for a long time was I didn't know what that presence was. I didn't know that that presence was actually within me, and that I couldn't find it really anywhere else other than within me. And so I have this list of stuff that I was going to do, or how I was going to be, or whatever, and then it often didn't turn out. And one of the reasons it didn't turn out was because I didn't believe that it was possible to turn out. And one of the things that came out for me when I was putting together the program for talking about today was when my first wife and I got married, and Connie was her name. And we got married in November. It was November the 14th of 1970. And we went on a tour out in Western Canada and came back. And about 2 weeks after I got back, so this was like in December, I got called up by my supervisor, and he gave me a promotion. And I was ecstatic because it was the part of the plant, because I'm a chemical engineer, and this was a big part of the plant, and where we produce all the products and everything. And so this is really great. And Christmas Eve, Connie and I were putting up our first Christmas tree. We had a little Charlie Brown tree that was about this out here. And it was about 8 o'clock that night, and I got a phone call from the plant. And the phone call is, Bruce, we've had a power failure here. Excuse me. And so off I went out to the plant with about 200 other people. Well, when I got there, it was chaos. I'd never seen anything like it. So in the plant, we had these huge evaporators that took the salt out, and then we produced potassium chloride, which was from the overflow liquor that was produced. And I walked up into we have an underground walkway, because it can get cold in Saskatchewan in the winter. So I walked up this thing, and there was piles of salt that were at least twice as high as I was. And my heart just took a sink, because I thought, Lord, it's going to take forever to clean this mess up. Well, to make a long story short, it did take a long time to get the mess cleaned up. But we did get it together. And one of the things that I still remember saying to myself, I am never going to let this happen again. And so what we did was we put together, what I did was put together all of the steps that we needed to be able to operate the plant. And there was a lot of stuff in there. And so we started with the stuff that we really needed help with. And as we did that, one of the things that happened over the next year or two was we had a plant that no matter what happened, as long as people were doing the stuff that they needed to do to learn the procedures and stuff that we had, then everything went fine. And it got so that we could have a power failure like we had this first one that I saw, and the previous one had been 3 years before that, and nobody knew what they were doing. And one of the things that I was really taken aback with was the plant manager came up to me about half a week after this happened, and he said, Bruce, he said, you were the only person out there that seemed to have any idea of what they were doing. Because he and everybody else was out at the plant trying to get this thing to run. And I was really taken aback. And then I realized after I got into recovery and started coming to church, Unity Church, and that's exactly what had happened. Like, I knew intuitively what we needed to do to change what was going on. And so I started to put all of that stuff together. And what it did was it made new people coming into each of the areas that we had. It made them be able to operate in a way that the plant would function. So if we did have something happen that first.
That's a perfect example, excuse me, because you're talking about adjusting on the fly. You're talking about getting a sequence where there was no sequence before. I don't know if you realize that. And then out of that, so a lot of times what we do is we have a method. Anybody familiar with problems in life? And we panic, and everybody runs around everywhere. Okay, and what Bruce was saying, we adjust. We have to say, well, it's not working. How many times have we? It's like I will have a problem and continue doing the same darn thing that created the problem. So you're saying, we adjusted and we put into a sequence. In other words, we have to do. You got to do this first, and you can't go to step number 2 until number 1's done. And we all have a tendency to want to be here and be upset because we're not there, instead of coming back here and putting a sequence in place. And then what comes out of that is balance, which is a perfect example of what you're talking about. So excuse me, I just heard this fall in place. Okay?
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, because that's true. That's exactly what happened.
And the other power that came in here was intuition. Now, how do we know things? Anybody agree? we have a God-given sense. You know, it's interesting, you know, a lot of the intuition classes that Madeline went to, the first thing they say is everybody has intuition. We just haven't learned how to use it. But yet your chemical background allows you to go in and put that conversation together. And you probably don't even remember how you did it.
Yeah, I do have it, that makes pretty incredible.
But it all came together.
But it all came together at some point.
See, and the idea is trusting yourself. So that's why we're discussing these powers. Because you can put these things in place. But yet, the key is, he followed what his gut said and continued on. Okay? So thank you for allowing me to interrupt.
Oh, you're very welcome. You made it, yeah, no, I'm really glad you said
It's a
that.
great example.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've created problems. So,
Yeah, well, you know, there was definitely a big problem created there.
exactly. And look at the hazards. You know,
Yeah.
you talk about a plant hazard. The ocean would have been all over you.
Oh, it was, yeah, we didn't have OSHA in Canada, but we had the equivalent to that. And so that would not have been a good thing to happen. And one of the things that we had, on the first effect evaporators were the temperatures, you know, reached 252 degrees, and then the mother liquor from that produced the product, which was potassium chloride instead of crystallizers. But one day we started up, we had this, I had been out in another area, came back into the plant area, and working in another area, and I came back into the plant area, and the temperature in the system started to go up, which was okay, but then it went up, and this was a few times later. It went up and went up and went up, and it's like, oh my God, we're gonna blow this thing up if we don't do something different. And so my operator said, yeah, everything's great, Bruce, it's all good. I said, well, what's going on there? So then I said, well, I'm gonna go up to where I know there could be a problem. So I went up to the top of this fourth effect evaporator, and sure enough, there was a 16-inch pipe up there, and the purpose of the pipe was to allow you to be able to get people in there when we had a shutdown. And what had happened was, even though I was told that this thing had been put in place, it wasn't. And so there's this huge flow of air into this thing, and it was supposed to be like at zero, you know, with no air inside this vessel. And here it was pumping in, you know, 16 inches around of this stuff pouring into there. Well, as soon as we got that, we stopped, and then we put that in place and got, you know, back up again. But the thing that really comes up for me about that is that you know, I didn't have the spiritual understanding of what was going on then that I do now. And one of the things that I'm grateful for is that I started going to church again after I got moved to the United States of America. And because as kids, we all got to church. And so when I moved to Beaumont from Alberta in Canada, and the job that I had up there, and I met went to another 12-step group, and I met my second wife, and we moved from Beaumont over here over to Austin in 1994, and I was doing so we got married in I guess it was in April, March or April, and then we moved over to Austin, and I didn't know it at the time, but I'd written something in February, and it said, she's a Now, did I want to believe that? No. And so along came a few months later, and she'd been away to a place in Montana where we both were for dealing with stuff that was going on within us. And she got back from that. I made this nice breakfast, and everything was just really perfect. And she said after that, she said, "Well, Bruce, I want a divorce, and I want to leave." and so it was like, "Oh, can we talk about this?" "Well, no, because I just spent 6 weeks up in Montana, dealing with this stuff." And it turned out, and what I was really grateful for, because by that time I was conscious of what was going on, within me and spiritually. And one of the things that I made the decision about was, I just have to accept it. I just need to accept it.
Divine order.
Divine order. And I didn't use that term, but that's exactly what it was. And I knew enough about what was going on for me that I knew that's what had to happen. So, the thing that I keep learning is that I really like this book here, and if you haven't got it,
Copies on the back.
it's really a good book, and I encourage you to read it. So,
Bruce, what I'm seeing, feeling, and hearing about you is that order is your perfect power. Because as you're talking, I can see how subconsciously your life goes in order. And you can see that order better than, like, some of us can't see the future like that. We can't see the order that's going to take place. So I'm really impressed about, what are you thinking, Robert?
I was thinking, it's amazing how he remembers the exact date.
The order of things, yeah.
And we've been together 54 years, and I could never do anything like that.
We were? Is that how long?
Yeah.
But really, his order.
You talk about order.
Yeah. Just kidding.
But see, and that's all in his brain.
Yeah.
And that's the sequence, okay?
So, because Bruce and I have been, really good buddies the time that we both attended uni, and Robert, when you talk about order being organized, balanced, and just, I read something recently that says change rarely happens without an increase in responsibility. And so, because you talked over and over in your stories that you told this morning about things needing to change, and as you created written documentation of processes, there's a responsibility for us as individuals to know from intuition, like, what changes we need to make.
And it was order.
And it's orderly, yeah, and it's like, okay, but to do that, something has to change for me to change. Like, I can't just wish it, right?
See, now
And
you're getting the
so,
chaos theory.
yeah, but
Those
it's
things never
in
improve.
proper order.
Yeah.
It's like kind of knowing in your order what's the next step, and being willing to embrace it and then figure it out, like what needs to be done.
Robert, talk about the chaos theory. That's so important.
The idea is things don't change unless we go into chaos first. Okay, and anybody stop and think about it. If you don't change, things go into chaos. It's like if you don't move to the next step, and we have, anybody familiar with being stagnant? Okay, and life, the idea is spirit is always for growth and expansion. Can you imagine spirit going backwards or regressing? No. So that in the physical world, things wear out. It's called entropy. So as things wear out, we have to revitalize them and go into another step, which is, and that has to be done orderly in order for that to occur.
So the idea is, if we're in chaos, it's just to wait for it to pass, and then the order takes place.
And the order takes place. And what it requires on my part is to be available and pay attention to what's
Yes.
going on.
Yes.
and if I need help, to get the help that I need.
Because
Because,
it's a little more than just waiting. That's when you're in chaos. There's a critical point that you have to take the right action at that point
Yeah.
to go into the new
There
state.
is our scientist.
But there's no way that you can know that by looking at it.
It's called tipping point.
And so it has to be highly inspired what that point is.
Yeah.
yeah, you just reminded me of something where, and that was the awareness that I got decades later, that exactly what was supposed to happen, happened that night. And because of that, as a group in the company, we made a lot of changes, and we went from being able to produce 600,000 tons a year of potash to 2 million tons a year
Yeah.
of potash. So
Okay.
this stuff really does work.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a wife number 3?
I'm looking forward to life.
I just want, it was hanging there.
I think there's websites.
Yeah, no, I've just realized in the last couple of months that I'm ready actually to be in a relationship again.
I don't know to say that.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
Thank you.
That's true.
No,
But see, see, change requires willingness to move forward. And I know you got things planned.
I thought it was a puppy we were talking about.
Well, I am gonna get a dog, but.
Sort of the corollary to that is if you try to do things at the wrong time, then it's not going to make any difference.
That's right.
There's an interesting idea in the 12 Powers in the book. It talks about order is one of the areas that has a positive and a negative outcomes. So you can be very orderly and obsessive about being neat, about being anything. So you can be obsessive, which violates spiritual law, which makes things go nuts.
Yeah.
If anybody's familiar around, the we call it obsessive personality, which some of us have a tendency to do. And order over the spiritual area is trusting things to work out. Okay, it's a very interesting correlate. It really is. So, which is what you're saying.
So it's super interesting, because we talked about the brain wants to figure things out.
Yeah.
The job of the brain is to figure things out.
Yeah.
But it's constant, it never stops.
No.
And so like training it to say, okay, I'm feeling like I need to fix this, I'm feeling like I need to step on it. But trusting that, hey, maybe now's not the right time.
Yeah.
Like learning to monitor
Yep.
your brain and your thoughts, to be
Yeah.
patient and know when it's the right time and what's the right
Yep.
step.
How do you tune into the inspiration?
And that's the order, the idea of order in spiritual conversations. Because the brain wants to take over and run us. And I don't know about your brain, but my brain's good.
Sometimes I find myself trying to figure out problems that I've already solved. They're done, they're over, there's been that ending and good feelings and forward movement, and I'm still back there trying to figure it out. And I have to remind myself, that's
It's
solved.
good. It's already
I
moved.
solved
It's
that.
already moved.
We're
Yeah.
done. Yeah.
Good. Good job.
Yeah, sure is.
I just think divine order are two of the most powerful words in my vocabulary. Because anytime I get upset over anything, I pull back and go, divine order.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that.
There's also the idea that you're not broken, you're not a sinner, you're not any of that stuff you've been trained to believe. The truth is you're a child of God, period. And if you're a child of God, what do you inherit from God? So that's the idea. When we talk about order, one of the books says, sooner or later you must decide who you really are. And my Bible says the kingdom of heaven is within. You're a child of God. The Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, and on and on and on.
Super quick, what you talk about, what you focus on is what you get.
Yeah.
So in creating spiritual order,
Yeah.
like what you focus on good, love,
Yeah.
peace, and not what CNN's telling you or whatever.
We go
Or
right back to the,
family member or
yeah,
whatever.
we go right back to the law of attraction, if you think about it. Thank you.
About what you asked for.
See what you started out.
I know.
If you look at it, that we've been talking about it in a lot of different powers.
Yeah,
You're still
It's
sitting?
a sort of negative side. Order is control.
yeah,
And if you come from fear, you're going to be controlling.
yeah,
If you come from love, you can't be controlling.
yeah.
Yeah, everything changes. Go through that change of turn.
All right, we're getting on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that.
Well, the thing that just has come up for me just as we talked through this morning was when I finished putting together this little program that I had for today, I was in some fear, I realized, because I was afraid it wasn't going to work out okay. And I don't know about you guys, but it worked out fine for me. And so it's just a great reminder for me of how my thinking can change what's actually happening and what's actually true. And that's the thing that I really need help from a power into the big reason why I have.
You realize how, you talk about trying to control the universe. In other words, I don't like what happened. Okay, thank you for sharing.